Hello everyone, welcome to this lecture in the GitHub Masterclass. This lecture will be all about installations of many different softwares which we will be needing to ultimately connect the bridge between Git and GitHub. So until now, what we have seen is that we have created a repository, and the situation is that you are in a company and you have created this machine learning project GitHub repository, and you're going to work with 5 people on different coding aspects related to this project. So let's say you have a client who has given this project to you, and you have 5 people who are going to work on this project. And let's say you had a team meeting in the morning, and you have been assigned something specific to work on this project. Let's say you want to build a classification model in machine learning. So the first thing to do is that you will need to write some code on your laptop, right? You will need to write some code on your laptop, and then you would need to somehow link that code with this repository. You cannot write code here itself. That's very inefficient. So you will need a software to write code on your laptop, and then you will need something else to connect that code you have written to this GitHub repository which you have created. That something which is the bridge is called as Git is that bridge through which you can essentially monitor or establish a bridge between your local changes and the remote changes. Where when I say remote, I mean the changes here on this website, github.com/vijuara AI/machine learning project. So let's say after the meeting you go back to your office, and then you are planning to write some code. The first thing to install is a software which will help you write code. And for that, the best text editor or the coding editor which I have used, and which is probably the most widely used coding editors, is VS Code. So if you have not already installed VS Code, I highly encourage you to type VS Code install in Google, and then click on this download Visual Studio Code. And based on your operating system, if you have Windows operating system, you can click here to install VS Code for Windows. If you have Mac operating system, click here. If you have Linux operating system, you can use the Ubuntu installation versions. I have the Mac operating system, so I'll click over here, and then the installation will start, the downloading will start, and then the steps are pretty simple. You just have to click on next, and VS Code will be installed. I'm not going to show the next steps of installation here because it's pretty straightforward. Once VS Code is installed, what you can do is that you can launch VS Code. So let me show you the interface which will show up when you launch VS Code. When you will launch VS Code, you will see an interface which looks something like this. Here what essentially you can do is that you can create different folders, and you can even write code here. In fact, mostly you can write code over here. So what we are going to do now is that we are going to create a folder in our desktop. So I'm creating a new folder here, and I'm the title is that Git Vijuara project. This is my folder over here, and currently you will see that this folder is empty right now. So what we can do is that we can now go to the VS Code, and then what we can do is that we can click on file, and you can click on add folder to workspace. So when you click on add folder to workspace over here, you can add this Git Vijuara project to the workspace. So here you can see that the folder has been created, Git Vijuara project. Then what you can do here is that within this project you can make several different changes also. So this is how you can essentially work with VS Code. So if you want to write some code, you can say code.py, and then you can say that print, this is my first code. So since this is not a tutorial on VS Code or coding, this is a tutorial on Git. So I'm not going to exactly demonstrate what else we can do with uh, VS Code for configuration, for coding configurations, but I just wanted to show you this installation because VS Code is going to be very important for us to access Git. So that's the first installation which I want you to do. The second thing which you can check is that you can right click here on this folder, and then you can click on open in integrated terminal. So here you can see that the terminal will open up. Now you might be thinking, what is terminal? If you are not sure of what a terminal is, it's totally fine. It's that interface on your laptop through which you can basically do things such as check whether files have been installed, folders have been installed. You can even run code. You can push the code from your computer to any online GitHub website, etc. So basically, terminal gives you the control to do several operations, and Git can be operated through the terminal in VS Code, and it can also be operated through the terminal in your operating system. For example, if you are using Mac, you can just press Command Enter and type terminal. So you'll see that the terminal opens up in Mac, something like this. This is the terminal in Mac, and you can even access the terminal from here, and you can also access the terminal from VS Code. So this is the terminal which has been accessed through VS Code, and as I mentioned, you can even access the terminal through Mac. Why do we need to access the terminal? Because all the Git commands which we are going to write, we are going to write some commands such as the repository which is there. It's on the website currently, right? It's not on our computer. We want to bring that repository from the website to our computer, and for that we are going to use Git. So we will install Git, but the we have to write somewhere, right? That take this file from the website and put it on my computer. Those statements we are going to write in this terminal, in this VS Code terminal. That's why we have installed VS Code in the first place. VS Code is a great link between Git and GitHub. So the first step which I wanted to convey through this lecture is to install VS Code, right? So the first step is we need to install VS Code for Windows, Mac, and Linux. The second step is to install Git. Now, Git installation also depends whether you have Mac, Windows, and Linux. It can be installed on all three operating systems. So all you need to do is that if you can just type git install, the first link which will show up is that downloads dash git. You can click over here, and you will see that there are separate sections for Mac OS, for Windows, and for Linux. So if you are a Mac user, so I'm a Mac user, so I can click on the Mac OS, and you can click on this binary installer over here. So click on this binary installer and click on this download, and the download will start. So the download will start immediately, and then you just have to follow the instructions on the screen to completely install Git on your system. So this is for Mac. For Windows, there is something different. So the website link itself is not different. You just have to go to the same link, git-scm.com/downloads. Click on Windows over here, but as and you click on 64-bit Git for Windows setup. You can click over here, and you can follow the installation steps. Now, at one point on in the installation, you will reach a stage where you will receive a prompt that do you want to install Git Bash. So Git Bash is essentially a terminal emulator for Windows. So I showed you this terminal for Mac, right? This terminal. Git Bash is some kind of a similar terminal specifically for the integration with Git, and it's available for Windows. So you can work with Git Bash, it's totally fine. For this tutorial which I'm showing you, it's fine even if you don't install Git Bash, because I'm going to demonstrate everything through VS Code. You can either use VS Code for Windows, or you can use Git Bash for Windows. I recommend VS Code because it's widely used. People also use Git Bash, so you can choose. But if you don't know what Git Bash is, I will suggest that you use VS Code, because that way you can also follow along with this lecture series. Okay, so Windows installation, it's the same. You click on this 64-bit Git, and you follow the instructions and install for Windows. And for Linux, basically you have to click on Linux/Unix, and then Unix, and then follow the installation instructions on this page. Now, once Git is installed, you can actually check whether Git has been installed correctly or not. And there is one very simple command to check whether Git has been installed correctly. If you are on Windows, you can go to Git Bash, or you can go to VS Code. If you are on Mac, you can go to the terminal application, or you can go to VS Code. I'll first show how to do this through the terminal application. So I've gone to the terminal application right now, and here I'm going to type git dash dash version. So once I type this, you will see that it shows up Git version 2.339.2. This shows that Git has been correctly installed on my system. This command is the perfect way to check whether Git has been installed on your system or not. Now, if you are using VS Code either on Mac or on Windows, let's go to the VS Code application. And here now, what you can do is take any folder, you can create any folder which you want, and then you can click on right right click on it and click on open in integrated terminal, and here you can write git, the same thing, git slash dash dash version, and here you will see the same thing, git version 2.39.2. So the same thing which we did in the terminal application, you can even do on the VS Code interface. This is the same process you can follow in Windows even if you are not using git bash. So now we can see that the git has been correctly installed on my system, right? The next step which we need to do to complete to complete the installation is to set git configuration. Why do we need git configuration? Because later when we are going to make changes from our git to the website, we will need to specify our name to identify who has made this change, and we have to specify our email, so that which GitHub uses to associate the change with your particular profile. So it's just a configuration which you make to specify that, hey, this is the user, I am the user with this name and which this email address who has made this particular change, which needs to be reflected on the website. So that's why we have to set up this git configuration. So there are essentially two commands to write, and you can again write it in the terminal application or you can write it in the VS Code. I'm just going to write it in the VS Code for now. So you can just first you can copy paste this git config dash dash global username, your name. So copy this, and your name you have to mention the name of the organization. So I'm going to say Visuara AI over here. What you can do is that when you have created the GitHub profile, this name will appear over here, right? You can mention that name. So I'm going to go to VS Code right now. I'm going to VS Code right now, and I'm going to say I'm going to copy paste this thing. Okay, and in the your name, I'm just going to change to Visuara AI. Okay, so that's the first thing which has been copy pasted. The second command is the user email. So I'm going to copy this thing and I'm going to paste it in VS Code, and the email is the same email which you had mentioned when you created an account. So here I am going to say hello at the rate vijuara.com. So see, now the configuration is complete. You can also do this both of these steps, and only then the installation will be complete. Remember these two commands, git config dash dash global username and then the name from the GitHub repository. Again, for your reference, you have to go to your GitHub account, go to this right icon and see your name over here. That's what you have to, this name. That's what you have to specify here. Then the second thing which you have to specify is your email, which is the email address you use to create your GitHub account. So I have specified hello at the rate vijuara.com. Once you complete these two commands, which means your installation is complete. Now Git has been correctly installed on your system. Again, for the sanity check, you can just type git slash slash version over here, and you should be able to see the Git version which appears. This brings us to the end of the lecture, where we have now successfully installed VS Code, we have successfully installed Git. In the next lecture, what we are going to see is a very interesting hands-on module where we are going to start seeing some basic Git commands, where we will link the GitHub repository which we have created with Git commands which we'll use in our VS Code interface. Please make sure the installations are done correct, because every single thing which will follow after this point will depend on the installation. Thanks a lot, everyone, and I look forward to seeing you in the next lecture.